Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We are here to recap week 12 of the SEC season. Don't look now, May just around the corner. By the time we get to next weekend, it will be May. And we pretty much officially jump on the on-ramp on the actual Highway to Hoover at that point. So
no doubt about it.
It is bearing down on us. So we've got a lot to cover. It was a fun weekend. A lot of interesting results, a lot of dramatic results, especially if you go back all the way to Friday. That was one heck of a day. So we got lots to talk about today. But before we get to any of that, I have to remind you that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover this season is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, which is your new home for Jordan Brand. Gear up today and take flight. Make your play in the latest head-to-toe Jordan gear for the entire family, available in-store and at academy.com. Unleash your greatness with Jordan now at Academy. That's Birmingham Barons great, Michael Jordan, by the way. We should make that known. Did you, Mark, by the way, did you ever see Michael Jordan play with the Barons?
Did not. That was my era. But
yeah,
it was a difficult ticket.
Sure,
Two,
I've heard that.
I was a poor college kid, and three, it just didn't happen logistically. Yeah. But it was quite the ordeal. I remember just everybody. It became a thing, right? Yeah. Jordan was a minor league baseball player, and at times, he would get a hit, and you'd think, all right, he's finally putting it together. But on the whole, it just didn't really work out. That's a lot of arms and legs in that swing. It was long, and it just didn't work out for him.
Yeah, it's so funny that just the difference in like the physical difference in basketball and baseball players, where Michael Jordan on a baseball field looked so gangly, and quite frankly, like kind of uncoordinated, even though obviously he's not. But just that's how it looked. Whereas on a basketball court, of course, it was like poetry in motion. So it was. Anyway, digression there. All right, Mark, we got plenty to talk about today, and we ought to start with Texas and Texas A&M because that was for a couple of reasons. One is it was the most anticipated series. Yes, there were other series that involved, teams that were ranked higher on aggregate, but in terms of just anticipation and interest, I think this was the top series of the weekend. Texas ends up getting a sweep. You were on hand for the first couple of days of that series, so I'll let you just kind of give us an entree to it. What was the weekend like in Austin? Tell us, I guess, first and foremost, a little bit about kind of what you witnessed atmospherically there in Dishfalk.
Well, I mean, it was packed, great atmosphere, no empty seats. There were a few A&M fans there, but it's like, I think the ticket prices for the Texas fans is like, hey, if we're going to sell to an A&M fan, you're going to have to really pony up for this. So there weren't as many as perhaps wanted to be there. It was kind of interesting on Friday when they announced the head coaches. They go through and they announce the starting lineups and the coaches and all that. And when Michael Early was introduced, there was some cheers. And then when Jim Schlossnagle was introduced, there were a lot of boos from the A&M side, okay? Then it was like Texas fans went, all right, we're not going to deal with this. So Saturday, the whole deal comes around, and it comes time. It's like a coordinated effort, man. It was like, they were ready for this. So the boos start, and then Texas fans just come in and just drown out the boos with cheers. And it's all you can hear is that. So I don't know what happened today, but I do feel like that was, an interesting part of this whole dynamic, the Slosh Bowl, right? It's such a polarizing figure in this rivalry. And I feel like, one, obviously the way he left was not something that any fan base is going to embrace. And then two, with what he's done moving to Texas has been so great that if you're a Texas fan, you don't really care what happened before, right? you've got an incredible team, and this guy's a great coach, and he's your guy now. And I feel like we're at that point where, I mean, he can do no wrong. And look at the team he's put out there. They are not the most talented team, but they make all the plays, man. They make very few mistakes. If it comes down and they need to make the big pitch, they need to get the big hit. It seems like they always do. And I don't know if you can continue to win at this pace that way, but they're certainly going to give it a great shot because they are rolling with it. It's just a magical season. And for A&M, who had come in playing so well, I don't think they really played that badly. They lost 3 one-run games. They pitched really well the first 2 days. They had some defensive miscues that hurt them. And then in the third game, they had all these opportunities early in the game and just weren't able to extend the lead. And then Texas came back and they got the clutch hit clutch homer from Adrian Rodriguez in the 8th inning to give them the lead, and that was it from that point. It was one of the most competitive series, considering the rivalry, considering the how close the games were, how good the teams are. I mean, that was as good as you're going to see most likely all year, with 3 one-run games, sellout crowds. This is hard to top. And these two teams really put on a show. And if you're A&M, you're really feeling bad because you had all this momentum coming into the series and you thought, hey, we can win this. And they were close to winning it. But then if you're Texas, just like, yeah, we stuck those guys. And we took their coach, and now we swept them. College baseball belongs to us right now. And that's, if you're Texas, it's kind of hard to argue with that.
Yeah, it's it couldn't have gone any better if you're a Texas fan than what happened this weekend, right? Just you're able to, just point to the scoreboard there. And it's such a good point you make about Texas just finding a way. Texas feels kind of magic right now, where I don't totally know how they're getting away with this all the time, but they are. They're making, to your point, they're making all the plays, and they seem to always just have one more thing in their bag.
Yeah. And obstacles keep coming up. I mean, Ballou's injury, out for the year potentially. He could come back for the postseason, but he's certainly out for the foreseeable future. They lose Jared Spencer. They just kind of shuffle things around, and they're still really good. And then today, starter, Flores goes what? I think he went 1+ today. I mean, he didn't go long at all. And then, next guy up steps in. They figure it out. They get to the end of the game. Don't even have to use Volantis at the end because he'd thrown the prior 2 days, and they're still able to get the win. It's just kind of one of those, the dominoes keep falling, and they keep falling in the direction to keep knocking the other one down. And you think eventually they're going to go askew, but things have been all lined up for the Horns.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Today, we've been kind of asking Texas. It's like the last little thing the last thread we have to pull on, where it's like of still having something to prove is, okay, you got 5 or 6 arms. Now it's 5 with Spencer down. You got 5 guys you really trust. Like, show us something else. And Thomas Burns pitched pretty well yesterday.
He was really good, dude.
Yeah. And, Duplantier pitched pretty well today. Yeah. You got some decent stuff out of Saunier. So they did it. Like they showed us, like, all right, we've got some other guys out here. And so that was huge. On the A&M side, real quick, Mark, I'm with you. Like, I don't think there should be any sort of hesitation about the fact that, what A&M's done the previous 3-4 weeks was not fraudulent just because they got swept by Texas. Like, they just got beat 3 times by, basically the game came down to one at bat 3 times in a row, Right. But they're now 8-13 in the league, and I have a lot of confidence that they will do what they need to do to end up in the postseason. I mean, they still have Mizzou on the schedule, and they should sweep that. But they also have LSU. Mm-hmm. They also have Georgia at Foley Field. Right. So, like, it's not like
they tougher.
Right. They can't just waltz into the postseason here. Getting swept was, I mean, even if they get a game, we're having a different conversation. Yeah. But the fact that it was a sweep does make it to where, like, okay, A&M kind of needs to regroup and redouble its efforts, because it, like I said, they can't just kind of assume they're going to be able to show up the next 3 weeks and just waltz into the postseason.
Yeah, certainly. If they continue to play like they have over this course, last 4 weeks, I'm including this week. I'm not really disappointed with how they played at all. They just, breaks didn't go their way. I do feel like they've got a clear shot to 13 wins, and I do think that 13 wins, and if they do that, that means that they had some success against LSU. They at least didn't get swept, or they went to Georgia and won a series. They didn't get swept there, and they sweep Missouri, which kind of everybody's doing. So I do feel like that it's there. They can't just go 1-2 against those two good teams, though. I don't think a 12-win A&M team in the SEC, you're going to be really sweating it and probably need some help in, on the bubble, or win some games in Hoover, something like that. But if they get to 13, and I know one game shouldn't matter, but I think the optics of it will, because their RPI, unlike Florida, who might have a similar SEC record, is juggling in there in the 20s, and they won today. It might be in the teens now. A&M's down in the mid-40s, and they lost today. So I don't know that it's the same. If you're trying to give the same story to the committee, I don't know that they're equal right now, and that's what A&M is going to have to face as they continue to climb from the basement, just like Florida's doing.
Yeah, and it just goes to show, like, the type of hole they put themselves in to start, for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it starts to really hurt you, is because you really were. It was easy for us to just assume a week ago, oh man, they're going to cruise into the postseason, and they might host, right? And like, I get that if they'd have won this series this past weekend, that's the conversation we'd be having. Mm-hmm. Instead, like, you get swept, and that's life in this league, right? And it's like, well, you shouldn't have gone 1-8, right? Like that, and that's really what it boils down to. And so but it's easy for, I guess what I'm getting at is, it's easy for you and I to sit here because we see this every year. Like 2 years ago, it was Tennessee. Last year, it was LSU and Florida, like, that just kind of make these runs second half. And I think sometimes I get a little bit sucked into thinking that, not that it's easy, but it's just like, yeah, this just happens. Like, every year there's at least one of these teams, and it'll probably be A&M this time. I'm with you. Like, I think the path is there, but their life was made hard by the fact that they got off to such a terrible start, and now that's kind of coming home to roost, if you will.
Yeah. So if you didn't get off to such a troubling start, the Texas series, while, it's a gut punch, you get swept by your rival who took your coach. It doesn't hurt you as much from a resume standpoint, but right now, you're just scratching and clawing, trying to climb that hill, and you fell down a few spots. Yep. So now you're going to have to take a leap and secure that pick and climb back up the hill. And it doesn't get any easier with LSU, who's, who we're going to talk about next, is just really feeling themselves after a great series over Tennessee. But what a fun weekend that should be. You got Texas, who goes to Arkansas next week, and you've got Texas A&M, who host LSU. Come on. What more can you ask for if you're an SEC fan in the state of Texas these last 2 weeks?
Yeah, no kidding. Like, yeah, it's exact. I'm with you. You mentioned LSU. Let's talk about their series win against Tennessee. The finish in game one of that series, probably one of the most improbable, thrilling finishes that I've ever seen. Down 3-0, and frankly, kind of just felt like the kind of game where Tennessee was just going to salt this thing away, and it was just going to be a 3-0 kind of clean, no drama win for Tennessee. And then 6 unearned runs later, LSU wins this thing. And honestly, it's one of those things, I think, where Alec Box Stadium gets an assist on that one. You feel for Ani Kunin.
Yeah, most places are empty at 1 a.m. Right, and not there.
Right.
They still were felt.
Right. And there are times as things do in that situation, like don't throw a baseball at an outfielder. Like that's unacceptable. But like in terms of like the engagement though, and then the noise and all that stuff, like incredible for that hour of the night. Poor Kendall Rogers was on hand fighting off, nodding off in the press box until that ninth inning when I'm sure he perked up.
No doubt.
but yeah, so an assist to the box on that one. Jared Jones, that walk-off home run, I think important on so many levels. One is obviously just that it secures the victory, but then two is like he's just had such a tough go of it in SEC play, and the reality is that LSU is just going to need him to be a much better hitter than what he's been in SEC play so far, because that lineup is kind of designed to have him as the centerpiece, because they don't have a lot of light tower power in other spots in the order, and that they need it to come from him, and it hadn't been, and now perhaps it is. So that was obviously huge. And then on the flip side of it, I think I got to give credit to Tennessee for coming back and winning game 2. Now LSU wins game 3 and they win the series, but I think there is value in winning game 2 if you're Tennessee, because it does show just the ability to take, talk about a gut punch, that loss, and just to come back and be like, okay, moving on, and get the win. Yeah, that's huge. And oh, by the way, and I didn't see this game with my own eyes, but they didn't have LSU, and some of it's just it's not in their DNA, but they didn't run on Tennessee. Even in the start when Marcus Phillips was on the mound. And so that was obviously big for Tennessee. So whatever they did, if they'd done anything differently, it worked. So kudos to them. But LSU getting back on the horse with its series win, big this week. And that's become my last thing I was going to say is, and that's become like an interesting baseball specific rivalry.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like it's just not, you don't think of it as on the, like on the football field, like you're just like, okay, that's probably going to be, that'll be a fun game when they play, but like, it's not like that has extra juice like it does in baseball.
Yeah. It's like their personalities just kind of rub each other wrong.
Yeah.
You know that guy at work that every time he walks by, you just, you don't like it. It might be me. I don't know. But that's kind of how these teams see each other. And it's just they're not vibing. On the field, Derek Curiel, incredible weekend, was great on Sunday, just really moving forward in his maturation process. He was good from day one. Don't mistake that, but he's elevating, and that's kind of scary if you have to face him. I think the other takeaway for me is Sunday gave us surprise starters for both teams. AJ Russell got the ball for Tennessee. Didn't go deep, but I felt like he pitched fine. LSU jumped on him a little bit early, but that's this was a big moment for him. I think that was a necessary step as he continues to move forward and hopefully get the ball again next week. And then Kason Evans, man, it didn't go well for him early either, but boy, he figured it out and got deep in the game. And then you had Zach Cowan behind him. They've been so good as a 1-2 punch in the bullpen. And now maybe you throw Cowan on Friday and you can bring him back on Sunday and Evans starts. And LSU, they have struggled. Chase Shores has not been good in his last few outings. He's lost his third starter spot. They've got to find a role for him. He's too talented to not play a key spot down the stretch here. So I do feel like you've got to experiment with him to get him right. But if Evans can give you what he gave you today against a really good lineup, that's scary, because Ianson is nails on Saturday with that big hammer. And then Anderson is good as anybody on Friday. So, that really differentiates them from most teams in the country. A lot of teams have one good starter. There's a smaller set that have two good starters, but there's a very, very small group that have three, and three that can match up with those cats that we saw for LSU this weekend. That may be unique. And if this is what we're going to see from them going forward, that changes the math for me on them, because I was, they were my preseason pick to win it all, and I doubt it. Okay. And this weekend sort of emboldens me to go, well, maybe, with Evans in the third spot there, m- if Cowan and whomever can step in and be that bullpen piece that can finish those games, because pitchers today don't go all nine. Somebody's got to nail it down in the ninth. And the offense continues to hit. Braswell hit this weekend. We mentioned Curiel. I mean, Jared Jones, great player. They've got a lot of pieces that seem to be getting going. That'll be fascinating next weekend. They go to College Station. A&M desperately needs that series, and LSU's playing so confident right now. You've got those, got all those pitchers. That will be a really fun series.
The word that came to mind with me with LSU this weekend was depth, and I mean that a couple different ways. One is that when we talk about pitching depth, I think sometimes that gets perceived as bullpen, right? Like you have a lot of options back there. Like you just, starter comes out, you've got 7 or 8 guys. Like that's I feel like, and I'm guilty of it too. When you say depth, I think that's what sometimes you go to, but
volume.
It can also mean what you're describing there, which is like, okay, Chase Shores is not performing like we'd want. Let's just take this guy who's been really good in the bullpen and let's just swap him. And then for him, Case and Evans, to do what he did rather than what you see sometimes, which is like, hey, we'll just get 2 good innings out of him and we'll move on, or, he gets through the lineup one time and then it implodes on him. So the idea that the LSU has enough depth to where like, yeah, we'll just flip those guys and it'll be just fine. And the second piece that made me think about that was it'll get lost in everything in Friday's game, especially with the walk-off homer, but they bring Dalton Beck off the bench, who had batted like twice in SEC play. And it's just a reminder that among the many things that LSU does really well as a program right now is that if you are on the roster, you are never buried at LSU. They seem to have this kind of thing every year where there'll be some point in the season where they'll just pull out a wild card of somebody you hadn't seen play in forever, and he comes through. And so they just do a really good job of keeping the entire roster ready at all times.
I mean, Dalton Beck had his moment, right? It was a surprise pinch hitter. We certainly, most of us didn't see that coming. I think he had 8 at-bats all year. He's actually been used more as a pitcher than as a hitter this year, and comes in, gets a clutch pinch hit. Now he'll never have to buy crawfish again the rest of his life. I mean, it was a great moment for him, and really kept that inning going to get it around to Curiel, who tied it, and then Jones, who obviously walked us off.
Yeah. Not a lot of last thing on Tennessee. Not a lot of worry for me there either. It'll be it can be interesting to see what they do with that third spot moving forward. Again, because their first 2 guys are so good, the third spot is gravy. I get it. I think there's a lot of hope among the fan base anyway that AJ Russell, by the time we get to the business end of this deal, is going to be that guy. And I get asked on weekend waypoints. The last couple of weeks, I've gotten asked a couple different times about that, more or less, and I've kind of tried to pump the brakes a little bit just because he's so early in this process of getting back, and getting stretched out and all, and maybe he never will actually get fully stretched out, right? I'm not sure it's in the cards this year for him to really be a guy who you expect to give you 7 innings and 110 pitches. Like, I just don't know that's really on the table. Maybe that'd be great if he was, but I think banking on it is probably a little bit of a fool's errand, just given all he's kind of battled through the last couple of seasons.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on to some other series, but first I have to remind you that this episode of Highway to Hoover is also brought to you by Tecovas Boots. Whether it's the leather in your glove or your tailgating chairs, baseball people know that quality matters. That's why we love Tecovas Boots. Born in Texas, just like yours truly, handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps and comfortable from day one, they're perfect for wherever the college baseball season takes you. From road trips to rivalry games, post-game celebrations, or just everyday wear, Tecovas Boots are made to go the distance. Find your perfect pair today at Tecovas. All right, Mark, we're going to talk about Oklahoma and Georgia. Georgia taking 2 out of 3 in that series at Foley Field. This, funny enough, was the SEC series I probably saw the most of this weekend, in large part because, well, it was a Thursday game. So those are, there's only 2 games on that night. So that's always easy to catch up. But then the other 2 games were early starts. And because I'm here on the West Coast, that meant like 9 a.m. Yeah. So like I was eating my hotel breakfast watching Georgia and Oklahoma the last 2 games of that series. But it goes without saying a big series win for Georgia. I get that the perception of them, which is true, it's not just perception, is play really great at home, don't know what you're going to get on the road. And when that's the case, you have to protect your home field. And so that's tough when you're dealing with an Oklahoma team that, as a Sooner super fan Jim Ross would say, Oklahoma is tougher than a $2 steak, in that they are never out of a game ever.
They'll fight.
Like I go back to that game too, where they're down 9-2 and it finishes 10-9 Georgia, and it's like Georgia was just like a botched surgery patient bleeding out on the table, and they got the bleeding stopped just in time, Yeah. But that's playing Oklahoma, like this is one of those series where Georgia won the series, but again, I just came away like thinking about Oklahoma too, and just how well they played and how hard they fought in that series, and it could have easily gone the other way. And before I turn it over to you, Mark, I would say that the Saturday win, the win that clinched the series for Georgia, was kind of the quintessential Georgia victory, in that they scored 6 total runs, but hit 4 homers to get 6 runs. And that they used 4 different pitchers and they walked 9 guys, but got just enough outs to ultimately get the job done. So they clinched the series that way, which felt fitting. But a big series win there for the Bulldogs.
With Georgia, I think one of the things that struck me is, they had really been struggling at the plate coming into the series. I mean, they lost 5 games in a row, something like that. And with Oklahoma jumping out to a big lead, just kind of cruising in that first game, and then Georgia fought and kind of got back into it and made it interesting at the end. And I felt like they carried that through the rest of the series. It kind of, whatever it was that was bugging or stopping, they lost it and were able to move on. And I felt like that's key for them, because we all understand the talent, especially offensively, and they're able to, and at home, on top of that, they're able to really make life tough on opposing pitchers, and they do that. And Oklahoma's got some really good ones. So that was big for me. I felt like, if the game would have gone on a little longer, if they would have started a little earlier with their uptick on Friday, that things would have been different for Georgia. One thing though that is troubling is Rylan Zabransky left the game with an injury and hasn't, at least I haven't seen an update. It didn't look great, so hopefully he will be able to return.
Yeah, Anthony, our buddy Anthony Dasher, I saw a tweet earlier that it was confirmed it was to his elbow, to his throwing arm. And I said on Weekend Waypoints, and I did not say this to be dramatic. This is literally just what I thought of. Is it looked to me, the way he was holding his arm coming off the field reminds me of when trainers go to the mound with a pitcher and they're like wiggling their fingers and holding their arm at kind of that 90-degree angle that looks like a precursor to Tommy John. And again, I'm not in any way saying that that's what I think this is. I am not a doctor. I'm not a trainer. But that's what it reminded me of. And so I immediately was kind of like, ooh, I don't love that, Right. So he, that's as far as we've gotten. Dash said, he just, he did confirm it is to his elbow, and that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. So, and I don't know the answer to this, and it may be different for everyone, but could you still bat? Could you still DH with that? I know post-surgery, you see guys do that. I don't know about hey, you need surgery. Can you do that? I don't know if those are equivalent there, but getting his bat in the lineup would be obviously a huge benefit.
I think you can, and I'll say this carefully because I don't know that this player has publicly, people know, like, I don't know that it's been said publicly that it needs Tommy John, but there is a player in the SEC who I know needs Tommy John who is batting.
Okay.
And so you can obviously play some positions a little better than others.
Right.
So but there is a guy I know of who needs Tommy John who is batting. Now it's not ideal. Like, I'm sure it's not comfortable. But yeah, so if it's the kind of deal where it's like, hey, we got, I don't know, a six weeks left if they get to Omaha,
right?
Maybe it's something you can manage for 6 weeks and get again, because he's not a pitcher. Like, you could get that repaired and probably be back on the field in a year pretty comfortably. But anyway, it can be done.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, obviously not great. On the Oklahoma side, one thing that stood out to me is Malachi Witherspoon is getting better as the season goes on. It kind of felt like it was very much like you knew what you'd get from Kyson, and then Malachi was a little bit of a mixed bag. His line doesn't look great from his start over the weekend, but defense really didn't help him. It seems to me that he's getting better, and obviously the stuff is very similar to Kyson and Toby Rowland. I had Toby Rowland on the podcast last week to talk Oklahoma, and he made a good point that I hadn't really thought about, and that's that because they are literally twins, facing Malachi Witherspoon is like facing Kyson again 2 days later. Yeah. And of course you're going to have a better look at a guy 2 days later.
Yeah, it's the same optics anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, like the stuff is a little different, but not a ton, but they're literally the same height and look the same and have similar delivery. And so, like, obviously we can't prove that one way or the other, but it is interesting.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Right, I think for Oklahoma, my feeling on them is they take great at bats. They make you work. When they hit for power, and I know Taki was injured. He had a great day on, was it Thursday, and then was injured.
Right. Yep.
When they get those big hits, I think that's what makes the offense go, because they're doing the other stuff anyway. Okay, they're aggressive and fight off pitches and all that kind of stuff. But when they have that extra piece in the middle to give them some score with one run and with one hit instead of three, that's what changes the math for me when I see Oklahoma. That's my concern for them going forward, is they're just not. There's in this world where it's the three outcomes of the homer, the strikeout, the walk. Do they have enough of the homer? And they've had more probably than we expected this year. I just don't know if it's enough to compete at the level that they want to compete at. And that's that. So you lose a guy like that, you need somebody else to step in and give you some thought. And that to me is what, my concern is. I see Oklahoma because I love the pitching staff. I love the lineup. Even the guys at the bottom of the lineup. I'm a big Dawson Willis guy. I think he's a really fun player. He's moves well. He's fast on the bases, and he's hitting in the 9-hole most days. I mean, those kind of. I mean, that's a problem if you're the opposition. I feel like that's where I am with Oklahoma, and if they can find that, Mudler's come back. He was injured for a while, and he had a pretty good day the other. I guess it was game 3. So somebody just to step in and give Easton Carmichael, a buddy there to be a power threat. I think that's where I want. That's what I want to see for Oklahoma, for them to make the next step. So when the postseason rolls around, they're probably going to be a 2 seed at this point. That they're going to be, one of those with that pitching staff and that lineup, they can go in and take a regional.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agree on all points there. Let's talk Ole Miss over Vanderbilt. They win 2 of 3. Vanderbilt continues to kind of yo-yo up and down. the pecking order in the SEC. Ole Miss, I guess, kind of similar, although they're just been a little more linear. Were hot, and now they tailed off. But now a big series win, and to me, the series kind of hinged on Riley Maddox on Saturday giving them a start that we hadn't seen from him. Yeah, like he's mostly been the guy. It's like, all right, he's going to take some lumps, but he'll get you through 5, and you'll have a chance to win. Like that's kind of the whole deal with him. But he went out there and controlled the game. And okay, Vanderbilt's offense is light, whatever. Like you can say that, but he wasn't doing that against light offenses otherwise, right? So, this was just a completely different pitcher than what he saw. And I don't know if it's replicable or not. I'm not really concerned about that. But to me, that was the hinge point for this series, was when he gave them that to clinch that series win. Like that's just something I would have never expected to happen. And now they're in good shape, having won the series.
Yeah, Ole Miss is really hard to beat at home. They've got that thing rolling, and with everything that program's been through, and that fan base has really, I guess, been rejuvenated this year, and they were out in force this weekend, and were able to, I think, impact the series. And then, of course, on the Vandy side, you have the questions about their offense again. I mean, they were great against Georgia, and we're thinking, all right, Vandy's figured it out. This is a great offense. And then they go to Ole Miss, and it's kind of back to where they were before. And that's troubling. So you don't know what you're going to get from week to week. And, Vandy's playing well enough. They could play at home and in the postseason, and maybe you get that that Georgia attack, right, that we saw and was so impressive. But we're just not seeing enough. What we are seeing a lot of is strikeouts in Game 3 with our boy Fennell. I mean, man, he's got it dialed up, and it was an interesting moment. He works so fast, and it just drives people crazy. Mike Bianco actually was ejected for going out and trying to get Fennell to slow down, the umpire. So, of course, the umpire doesn't like it when Mike comes out, ejects him, and then tells Fennell to slow down, of course, right? So it was kind of an odd moment, we'll call it, in the finale. But still, I do. That was the expected outcome for me. I felt like Ole Miss would win this series at home because they play so well, but Vanderbilt would not get swept because their pitching is just so it is going to keep them in so many games that they're not going to be. You're not going to take all 3 unless you just really rock them, and that's probably not going to happen very often.
Connor Fennell might be the most fun watch in the SEC this year.
He is for me, man. He's one. He's near the top, if not the top. Because how can you be? I mean, he's getting strikeouts like he's throwing 99 and he's throwing 89. Okay.
Yeah.
And he's just mixes it in, and he ticks people off because they don't like how fast he works, and it's just an interesting game every time he steps out there.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a lot of fun. We need more variety is always good as far as I'm concerned. Although variety is also what makes them tough. So other teams want to see less variety from Connor Fennell. Let's speed it up here, Mark, to finish it up. Florida took 2 of 3 against Arkansas.
There.
Yeah, honestly, that result could have been higher up on our rundown here. But since you mentioned you have thoughts, let's throw it your way first. What do you got on that series?
With as many injuries as Florida has had, they go into Game 3 on Sunday without Colby Shelton. Okay, they aren't even sure who's going to start on the mound. They start Barlow, and he gives them like an inning, right? And they just kind of piece it together from there. And you beat Arkansas, who's one of the best teams in the nation, in a rubber game. I think Florida's figured it out, Joe. I think that Florida is going to continue to win series. They're going to win enough to get into the postseason, kind of like last year. And they're going to be that 3 seed that nobody wants to see because I mean they're going to get a little healthier. Shelton should return. Ty Evans, who's been injured, came back today, hit a home run. All of those things they're just trending in the right direction. Liam Peterson was as good this week as he's been all year. Jake Clemente has turned into, he went from just a serviceable starting pitcher into one of the best relievers in the country. Look at his numbers since he's moved to the closer role. He's been dominant. He threw 5 2/3 scoreless innings and over two games this weekend. Just really getting it done. Florida's different than they were when they were. What were they, 1-11? I forget how bad it was. It was bad, but now they're trending up, and they're 8-13 right now, and have a real path to get in. And I think their RPI is so good. I think if they get to 12 SEC wins, they're going to get in because their RPI is so good, and the way they're playing towards the end of the year. Plus, taking 2 out of 3 from Arkansas, you took 2 out of 3 from Florida State. You've got those kinds of wins that bubble teams typically don't have. So, I'm starting to buy on Florida right now, and I would not have said that 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, when you said that, how quickly we forget, because when you said they were 1-11, I was like, surely that can't be right. I just went and looked at, yep, they were 1-11, and that just, how on earth? Like, that means they're 7-2 in their last 9
against tough competition. Yeah,
right. Yeah, I was gonna say, and don't look now, like they got South Carolina coming up. It's on the road, but still, that's a series you think they'd win. Okay, you got Texas on the road. That's like you
tough.
get one game, and you dance all the way back to Gainesville. Mm-hmm. But then you got Alabama at home to end the season, and that's obviously a very winnable series. So yeah, they're in that path. Depending on how you value having the games against Missouri, right, might be one of the I don't want to say easier, but one of the smoother ones compared to some of these other teams we talk about. We can talk about Mississippi State here in a minute, but that seems pretty doable, right? Don't get swept by Texas, which is easier said than done. Just ask A&M, but it's there for them for sure.
Yeah, I do feel like Florida has a path where if you're 1-11, how often do you have a path?
Yeah,
it just doesn't materialize. Even if you start playing better, your hole is too big, and they're out of the hole. Now they're just trying to get to where they can get recognized as one of those at-large teams that are deserving, and they're certainly doing their best impression on one right now.
Yeah. Let's we'll pivot to the Auburn winning 2 of 3 against Mississippi State, and I promise we'll talk about the Auburn piece of it. So Auburn fans, if you're wondering why we're going to start this conversation talking about Mississippi State, it's because similarly with this series loss, Mississippi State falls to 7-14 in the SEC, which obviously kind of dug that hole a little bit deeper. They've got Kentucky at home, they've got Ole Miss at home. That's obviously going to be electric, and then they do end with Mizzou, albeit in Columbia. And that if Mizzou is 0-27 going into that last series in Columbia, I wouldn't blame
State needs to sweep. Oh man,
I would not blame them for a minute for playing that series super tight. But regardless, so let's start there, Mark. How do you kind of weigh their chances versus Florida, A&M, the other teams we've talked about that are kind of in this mix?
Well, I would put them third of those 3. I would put them behind A&M and Florida based on how they're playing right now. They're just
and they are a game behind those 2.
Yeah, and they're giving up so many runs. And fortunately, they're scoring some runs, which is on the positive side of it. They're just not able to get enough outs, and they haven't played good enough defense this year. It's a team that kind of, when they click, you go, wow, this is a really good team that they can make a run. And then you wait on that to present itself again, and it just doesn't often enough. I do feel like having those series at home, Ole Miss and Kentucky. In that arena where they need to win, if the fan base has not checked out yet, which we'll see, that can be a difference maker, because when that place is rolling, especially when Ole Miss is there, when that place is rocking, it absolutely impacts the game. And I feel like if they could win both of those home series and then go to Missouri and you only have to win 2 to get to 13 wins, they're going to make a regional. I really feel like that. The problem is I don't trust that they can win both those home series against Kentucky and then turn around and do it again against Ole Miss. Maybe they get one of the two, and then you're kind of looking at trying to sweep at Missouri, and you might be able to do that, but it really puts a lot of pressure on you, and then you're really on the bubble as you head into Hoover, and you got a scoreboard to watch, and you need to win games, and all of those kinds of things that this program it's not in a happy place right now. So you're trying to alleviate some of the pressure so it doesn't just continue to build. And I feel like they really need they need something positive. I didn't expect them to go into Auburn and win that series. Auburn's really good, especially at home, man. So I'm not out on Mississippi State making a run, but I am out on how they lost, giving up so many runs and so many home runs too. Just they're going to have to pitch better, or none of this really matters.
I think that's fairly put. I think it's tricky too. Like I think it's a good break for Mississippi State that Super Bulldog weekend falls on that weekend Kentucky comes in, because obviously that Dudy Noble is always raucous, but a Super Bulldog weekend it's a whole different deal. And I think that the Kentucky team is another one of those teams they're better now than they were at the start of SEC play.
Oh yeah.
Feels like they've kind of gotten over a little bit of a hump. They figured some things out. Ben Cleaver's pitching well. We can save the Kentucky discussion for the next series, but that being Super Bulldog weekend, I think is big, because I do think that is a series that I very well could see Kentucky winning. They still might, but having it on that specific weekend, I think is helpful. Yeah. On the Auburn side of it, 2 things. One is, I think it is a good sign for them that they won the game they did in game 1 of that series, where it was clear it was just going to be who gets the clutch hit last, and it was them, with a Cooper McMurray double late in that game. And of course it's Cooper McMurray, like just a steady veteran who kind of gets overlooked, between Ike Irish and these super freshmen and all that. Like, it's just Cooper McMurray's kind of ends up being the guy that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes from a outsider's perspective. And so to have him come through there, I think was fitting. And then we've said it a bunch on this podcast the last few years, Mark, that in the SEC, winning ugly Sunday games is just something you have to do if you want to do anything in the postseason. And that's what today was. Like, it wasn't particularly pretty. Neither team got good pitching. And then Auburn just bludgeoned the ball enough to win the series. And that, to me, that's like, to me, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. They just found a way to win ugly, and you win the series, and you don't have to apologize for it.
Yeah. And when Cam Tilley was the surprise starter on Sunday for Auburn, it didn't go real deep. Makes you wonder if it's Christian Chatterton's turn again. He was so good in those 3 midweek starts. And he was for those who don't know, he was the Sunday starter for most of the year, and had some rough outings, and they kind of set him back, and he pitched in midweek. And 2 of those wins were against Georgia Tech, who can really swing it. So I do feel like maybe that's the move they play. And if he's figured it out, and if he pitches, in SEC play the way he did against Georgia Tech, who's an SEC type offense, then yeah, you'll take that. You'll feel really good about it, because that offense is really, really humming right now. Auburn does have Tennessee coming up, that in Knoxville. And for me, I think if Auburn, because Tennessee is not the same, they've also lost 2 home series and 3 of the last 4 series overall. if Auburn could go in there and win, that pretty much takes the mystery out of it. Are they going to host or not? Because the schedule is still really tough. They're 11-10 in conference play. You want to be above 500 historically to host, and that would really, help them get to that mark. The schedule's so tough. I did a piece last week on intra-conference strength of schedule. At that point, Auburn's was the toughest. It was also the toughest with the overall schedule with the games that hadn't been played yet. We'll reevaluate that after this week's games. And then also, if you count non-conference, all right, the overall schedule was the toughest of all of the SEC teams. So it's they're going to have to earn it if they're going to earn a host site in renovated Plainsman Park, which would be an electric atmosphere for a regional.
If you're media covering that event, bring your binoculars. But yes, it's a beautiful renovation from what I've seen. I'm looking forward to getting down there at some point, perhaps for regionals. Who knows? Maybe I'll do the thing I did a couple of years ago where I just basically lived in Alabama for weeks because I went straight from Hoover to regionals.
You took a knapsack and a stick and rode the trains. There you go.
Right. I did laundry in a hotel. All right. So let's talk Kentucky, South Carolina now. I alluded to it a little bit earlier. Kentucky's just a better team now. Now, if you're going to nitpick their series a little bit, it's that the game they lost to South Carolina was a 1-run loss in a game in which, by the way, South Carolina did not have Ethan Petrie. Apparently this weekend was injury weekend for key players. And I don't think there's any single player more important to his lineup than Ethan Petrie for South Carolina. But, Kentucky lost. And if they had swept that series, I'd have to look at where their RPI is right now. But I guess it's a little too out of range. But you could have at least started to maybe squint and see a scenario where they kind of back into hosting maybe. But now, they're still what? They're 10-11 in the league, so that's still got work to do. But that's a little nitpick. But otherwise, I think a really positive series for Kentucky keeps momentum going. The story for me, in addition to just winning the series, is that Nate Harris seems to have emerged as a guy for them.
Really
and
well.
Yeah, and again, you can apply we talked about Vanderbilt's lineup maybe not being the one you want to draw all the conclusions from, similar with South Carolina, just not one of the more powerful offenses in the conference. But, Nate Harris had been kind of a 3-4 inning guy, and he threw 7 this weekend. So just that alone, the fact that he was able to go through any SEC lineup multiple times and be as effective as he was, I think is a huge, huge development, because now you're looking at rotation of, whatever Nate Harris ends up being, but we've seen this ceiling, and you're combining him with McKay. Yeah, the James McCoy, Nick McKay thing just gets me. I wrote that Nick McKay story last week and had to correct McCoy to McKay probably a dozen times. So you've got McKay, you've got Cleaver, and now with Nate Harris showing that he's got this kind of ceiling, suddenly if you're Kentucky, you probably feel pretty confident about that rotation against just about anybody.
Yeah, that if Harris continues to pitch like he did, then yeah. And McKay can, I know he wasn't as good this week, but how could he be as he was last week? There was some, I guess regression, we'll call it. But I do feel like with those three, they can match up. And that's what's going to make them so dangerous. We're not there yet. But when they get into a regional play, because they can go into a loser's bracket and climb out of it, because I do think there's enough depth that they can win some games there. And that offense is going to give a lot of problems to loser's bracket teams. I do feel like, this was a series you're playing at home against South Carolina, who's, 15th out of 16th in the league. You got to win this series, and they did. So from there, Kentucky's in position. A few weeks ago, we didn't have them in the postseason, or they were one of the last few teams in if we did. And now they're solidly in and in really good spot now where, it's going to take a collapse for them not to make it. And we did not give Minge the benefit of the doubt. They lost basically the entire lineup from last year, most of the pitchers, and replaced everyone. They had very few holdovers, and there was some doubt that they would be able to have a season even this successful, where you're probably going to finish 10th, 11th in the conference. But you're still, if you're 10th or 11th in the SEC, you're probably still in top 25 in the country, close to it. So I feel like that if you're, maybe we need to reevaluate what that staff is capable of, and how they're able to bring in players that fit what they do and who buy in and are able to elevate into in where the sum is greater than the individual pieces. And I feel like that this staff does as good a job of that as anyone.
100% agree. That's really well put. And they're earning the benefit of the doubt, right? Like, I've had Kentucky fans ask me that, like, when do we start to get some benefit of the doubt? And it's just like, hey, because this is this league, I think if Kentucky played in the Big 12, and I'm not disparaging the Big 12, but it would have been a different deal in the preseason. I think there would have been a little more, but you start to stack up rosters and it's just hard. Like, you have to be in the talent acquisition business in the way that LSU and Tennessee and Arkansas are, to be in that upper echelon year after year after year. And Kentucky just hasn't been that. But I tell you what, like, if they get to another regional here, that's 3 in a row for the first time in program history, because, oh, by the way, getting to the postseason back-to-back years last year was the first time that's ever happened in program history. I mean, this really is a program making a lot of history year after year. And they will start to get some of that benefit of the doubt. And don't look now, but they will lose some key pieces off this team. Cole Hage, notably, is out of eligibility, but there's a lot of young guys on this roster too. Their best hitter other than Cole Hage is arguably Tyler Bell, and that dude's a freshman. He has like twice as many doubles as anyone else on the team. So, like, the guy is a star already. And so anyway, that's looking ahead to 2026, but it does look like they've got some momentum here. Last series, Mark. Alabama sweeps Mizzou. That game was so close on Thursday. Like, you thought Mizzou was going to do it. Mizzou was 5-0, and they didn't score again. And then the cruel irony of it is that they didn't pitch great, but they pitched well enough to plausibly win the game. Yes, it was a 7-5 game, and the 7 didn't come until late, until the 8th inning. So that they were right there, and it just slipped through their fingers, and then it got progressively worse as the weekend went on, and today they just got blown out. So another tough blow, but kudos to Bama for not getting shaken up by that game 1 deal. They got good starts from Riley Quick and Zane Adams. Zane Adams was really good, complete game in game 3. Zane Adams, I think, individually needed that, but certainly Alabama did, because they're working through some stuff on the mound. So took care of business. Can't ask for anything more. Positive development there for Alabama.
Yeah. On the Alabama side of it, certainly they have proven that that's a team. We talked about this with Oklahoma, that never feels like they're out of a game. They're going to continue to take good at bats and be able to fight. And you put a 5 spot on them in the first, and they're like, all right, that means we got to score 6. Right. And they were able to do that. And I feel like that's a team. It's a bunch of older guys, and they've got some superstars, and I feel like they got good leadership on that club, that they're going to be able to win a lot of close games this year, and that's what happened. On the Mizzou side of things, I mean, they're 0-21, staring at 0-30, and they had the 5-run first, and it was kind of a weird deal how that happened. It was some infield hits and maybe some misplays and things like that. And that's baseball. Over the course of the year, you get those things in your favor, and that's how you win games against teams that are more talented than you. And I do feel like that Mizzou is going to have one of those games where they get those kinds of breaks, and maybe they follow it when somebody hits a bomb, something like that. And then they get that great pitching, or at least good enough pitching, in the same game. And it just seems to not happen on the same day. They don't get those three things. And you would think just based on sheer odds, they would. And so, I mean, it's a team that's been riddled with injuries, especially on the mound. And they're just trying to piece it together. They're getting a few pieces back. Sam Horn threw in game 3, and he was really good the first inning, and then it fell apart. But he's a talent. They've got some other pieces that can help. It's just, it's a historically woeful record in SEC play in a year that the SEC has never been more powerful. And some of that is on Mizzou, and some of that is on the rest of the league, and some of that is just on the injuries, the bad luck and those sorts of things. And I do feel like they're going to get somebody. They're going to get one. They're going to go 1-29 this year, and I kind of feel bad for saying that at this point, that I would feel good for them to get the 1 as opposed to the 0 for, because it's still just a terrible record. But my goodness, Joe, they're really staring at 0-30.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I've probably been asked that question more than any other question over the last couple of weeks. Yeah. Like, are they actually going to go 0-30? And they might. And the thing is, it's on a human level, I see it a couple ways. I'm with you. Like, on a human level, if nothing else, I want them to win a game in the league. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, on a human level, I do not want any team to have to be the team to be the one, right? So, like, it's just a tough situation all around. Yeah. But it is what it is. Like, they're going to have an off season of, regardless of what they do or don't do, and that's not me playing coy, I just don't know. It's going to be an off season of, I think, real, like, look in the mirror time. Yeah. For Mizzou and their coaching staff, because obviously this is not it. I was going to say that the administration, has to be careful to make sure that it's understood that this is not okay, but that goes without saying. Like, how could they, right? Like, anyway, yeah. It's just tough. Like, there's really no other way to put it. It just kind of sucks that it has, because, they were always going to struggle this year. I think we can be honest about it and say that, but you kind of thought it was going to be the normal struggle,
Yeah, the 6-24 or 7-23 kind of.
Yeah, 6-24 happened to Ole Miss 2 years ago. Yeah. Like, that happens. But yeah, just the possible goose egg is tough. So, all right, Mark, that's an episode. Let's go ahead and let the people get on with their evenings. Busy, fun weekend in the SEC. And at this point, with so much on the line week after week, there is, that will only continue to be the case as time goes on. As we head towards, I realized at the top I said week 12. This was week 11. Next week is week 12. I will have to make sure I let them know to edit the title that we have here on the recording there. Whoops. Good one, Joe. I'm going to blame it on being on the West Coast and my body clock being all messed up. We'll just blame it on that. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. I want to thank our sponsors, Academy Sports and Outdoors and Tecovas Boots. I want to thank Mark, as always, for joining me, and thank you, the listener, for listening. We'll talk to y'all soon.